Mr. Edward Hill.
Hello.
Welcome to CamTalks.
Well, thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for making time for me this morning. I know that you've been a very busy bee recently, and so I'm very, very grateful that you'd come in.
Well, it's wonderful to see what we're all going to talk about.
Yeah, well, I mean, I always wonder after, I invite someone in and then I have to do a little bit of digging and find out where the skeletons are buried. And then I go, do you know what, maybe we don't talk about that. But we do tend to get a lot of interesting stories out of people. And I believe you are.
Well, I've lived in lots of places and I've done quite a few things. So there's always the positives and the negatives.
You really have done an awful lot of things. We only have about 7 hours on each of these cameras. So if we can keep it short.
7 hours.
Yeah,
I could fly to Miami on them.
Well, I don't know from Alderney. It's always a challenge.
Actually,
Getting
no, maybe it's 70 hours.
maybe 70 hours. Well, look, Ed, you've been such a massive part of this island's culture for many years now. But where did it all start? When was the first time you ever came to Alderney?
I came here when I was 3. My parents had my father ran a PR agency in London, and his partner, who was a sort of old waffling colonel, Dad was saying, he's looking for a place to take the family on holiday and, buying a sort of place. And he said, why don't you consider Alderney? And there was an advert in the Daily Telegraph for Sharp's Farm, which was a ruined farmhouse. And so they answered it. And they was under Madge Phillips, who used to run the estate agency here. And so they flew out in November, and they got on the taxi and they said, we're going to Sharp's Farm, and the taxi like, oh, don't go there, it's haunted. So that was thing. Anyway, they looked around about 5 different houses on that weekend and couldn't find anything. And then on the Sunday evening, it was a moonlight night, and Madge Phillips said, well, there's always Bonza House. And so my father goes down there and sees it behind the moonlight, and then says, oh, that came back, said to my mum, we found the right house. And they bought it next day.
Wow.
And it was a fully furnished guest house. It still has now all the door numbers, and even last year I had a guest who had stayed there in the 50s
No
knocking
way.
on the door, and they were reminiscing.
Did you let them in?
Yeah, we had a lot. And I actually interviewed him on my phone because I was so amazed to meet someone who actually stayed in the house as it was a hotel, And then we were brought out. In those days, it was a heron, and it flew from Gatwick to Alderney.
Gatwick?
Yeah, yeah, you wouldn't believe it. Yeah,
Direct
those
flight?
days are gone. But I mean, there was a direct flight. I think it was twice a week, and it was £3 each way.
What? Hold on a second. This is 3 English pounds
Yes,
each way.
each way. So yeah, but you got to realise it was 1967. So I mean, but indeed it was my first flight as a child, and I remember it all quite clearly. And Alderney then was much more wild.
I've heard the stories.
And it was, for instance, like the milk was poured in little silver jugs you had to pour. The milkman came round and just poured it in. But it was a very whizzy sort of it was slightly elitist, actually, people who were living here. I mean, and we didn't have a car, so it was all bicycles. And my parents just sort of, we ended up spending, all our holidays here. And it grew from that, really. But yeah, from the age of 3, I was in the back of the bicycles, those little child seats, and I remember being dragged around the golf course. Are
you a golfer? Do you play golf?
I do play a bit. Well, funny enough is I built a golf resort in Egypt, but I didn't ever actually play the course.
I love that.
Sometimes when it's all right in your face, you just don't do it.
Yeah.
So, but in those days here on Alderney, my parents were founder members of the golf club. And I remember being dragged out on an Easter with a howling northeaster, and the only reason I went was because we get a lemonade at the end.
Oh, I
And
love that.
anything, you know what kids are like, anything, to get a sweetie or something.
Yeah.
And you stand there, oh God, it was freezing. I mean, but I had lessons then with Pete Cunningham. Can you imagine?
Our pro.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
amazing.
actually, do you know one of Alderney's really big heroes, Pete Cunningham?
Mm.
And he was, he beat some of the top players on the circuit, and in fact, he holds the record up there. I think he did a round in 26 shots, which I think is about 8 shots less than one else has.
Wow.
But
I can see it's framed up there. He won't let anyone
he
forget it.
I mean, we had in those days, we had people like Patrick Tallock and some really quite big household golfing names came, and he he gave them a run for their money.
It is a nice course, though, isn't it? I mean, like to think that you can see the sea from, all the
It is
different directions.
beautiful. And also, funnily enough, it's an extremely good course to learn on because it's very punishing. It's narrow. And you go off course and you're in, it's lost ball territory and things like that. So in fact, when we used to play in London in a place called Roehampton Club, which was a London course, it felt like we were playing on a football field. Upon here, it catches a lot of people out, that golf
Yeah,
course.
no, for sure. I mean, and the fact that you've built a course, and I guess you are a sporty person, though, aren't you? I mean,
Well,
like,
I am. I mean, I might not look it, but I am. But funnily enough, is that was done by a top golf designer called Carl Litton, who's designed courses all over the world. I mean, what happens with the golfing world is you get big names like Gary Player and all this and that, and they basically flog their name. So it looks good on in an investment brochure that the course designed by Bob Championship. But yeah, we built one in the desert, and we used a very special type of grass which came from North Carolina, and I can't remember the name of it. It was like papalopshing or something. Anyway, it was incredible. And if you go and see this golf course now, even though it's in the middle of the desert, okay, the grass looks like the center court at Wimbledon.
wow.
And it goes on. It's a long 18-hole course. It's probably one of the reasons why I never played it. Couldn't be bothered.
Yeah.
But when you're involved with it, and you're selling all the real estate and you're doing all the other things, it's like a day in the office. And I'm not that into golf, to be honest. I like it for a bit of fun, but I don't like it when it gets stuffy and it gets very serious. And I went on a golfing weekend with 3 mates, all of whom had 3 and 4 handicaps. I was the worst in La Manga in Spain, and I just got a headache. Because the pressure of playing, with people of that level, they do holes in 3, holes in 4, and you're on your 8th shot, and they're sort of everyone looking at you. It's not for me.
And you're always much further away from them than you'd like to be, searching for your ball in a bush or something.
Yeah, and then and there's those faint, when it gets in the wall or whatever. And there were, in this particular course in La Manga, there were ravines, and I was forever down the ravine. I was always about 15 meters lower than they were, and actually that was really the end of fun, golf. But I do play the other day, like Texas Scramble. I enjoy that because it's relaxed and it's funny, and it's an all play. Though I do think Alderney does have a fantastic golfing option here, but I would like to see it have more members, if I'm being honest, of a younger generation, and I think that's going to be a struggle onwards.
Well, I'm sure we'll figure that out.
Well, it
What
always does.
what drew you to sort of? I mean, you are an entrepreneur, and being able to find a piece of desert and then decide that this is what we're going to do. I mean, so what was your sort of career? You're looking at a real estate buyer. What did you do?
Well, it went back further than that. I mean, I was always knew when I was sort of in my teenager that I was going to not live in the United Kingdom. I knew that there was this misfit, and I originally started as a tennis player. My parents took me to southern Spain to train with Lou Hode, which was he ran a thing called the Campo de Tenis in near Malaga. And I sort of knew that I was going to have a dimension that wasn't going to be normal. And when I took literally the split decision to do Spanish A level, at a school where I hadn't even done O-level Spanish, nothing. So I did Spanish A-level in 2 years. I mean, my parents were a bit shocked, to be honest. And I think they thought that actually I was going to have a permanent holiday, whatever. So they actually said to me that, and also in those days, the top universities in the more traditional subjects like English and history and those kind of things, they were very hard to get into. I
Mm.
mean, but on Spanish was actually quite easy because there weren't that many people applying. So in fact, in the ACA form, I got 5 offers, and anyway, that's another story. But my parents said, look, we're not going to do this. We're not really that keen to fund this. If you've got to go and show that you can get a job in a Spanish company. And the only one I knew was Iberia, or Iberia, the Spanish airline. And so I wrote them a letter on my little letterhead, handwriting. And anyway, I got an application form back and I signed it, sent it back. And next thing, I got a phone call. And then within 3 weeks, I was working for the Spanish airline, starting off in the check-in in Heathrow, because they had their own station there. And then they said, well, would you go to Madrid and train to do the season as cabin crew, because they needed English speakers on board. So that's when I started to live abroad and started to,
Wow, so you were a cabin
yeah, I was the
crew.
first ever English cabin crew on Iberia.
Wow.
Everybody else was all Spanish.
Wow, what was that like for you? I
It's
guess this is where you get your very personable, positive
Well,
charm.
actually, we could be quite rude to the passengers. Iberia wasn't very well known for being the most friendliest of carriers. I mean, it was obviously for me, this is between school and university, so I was young, and I ended up living in Madrid. I mean, it all sounds great, when you're from, now people are a little bit sort of blasé about, but Spain wasn't quite the Spain that now. I mean, it was quite pioneering for, there was these work permits, and it was a much more closed country. I mean, it had been under Franco. I mean, we're talking, this was 1982 stroke 3. And they'd only just had to transition to democracy, and Spain was, particularly Madrid, was very different society to what you see now.
Mm.
And so I had to go and live in Madrid and be based out of there. We worked on A300s, Airbus, and DC-10s.
Wow.
One, the same plane caught fire on me twice, which was,
Oh God.
interesting. Yeah, it was very different.
I guess plane safety back then was all about
Well, no, there was training, but I did notice that when it came to the evacuation, that some members of the cabin crew weren't quite as confident as they should be.
quick enough.
Yeah. This particular plane had a problem with the air conditioning, and the oil kept on going through it, and
Oh,
it
my Lord.
created this thing. So we had 2 emergency evacuations. But it was quite interesting because the main route that I did was Madrid to Malaga, then Malaga to London, then London to Malaga. And even when I started to live down on the Costa del Sol, I still had people who remembered me from those flights.
I love that. Wow. And so how did this all spiral into real estate then? Because I'm guessing
I did
you
a
had
degree in Spanish, and I did Spanish, French, and history. I went to Granada University. I also went to the Sorbonne in Paris. And then when I graduated, all my friends all were going to banks, graduate training programs for all the big merchant banks that were there, and I really couldn't add up. I mean, when I went, and I got a job with a company called Euromoney, which was a financial marketing company with the magazines and conferences. And anyway, basically, I went round Europe selling space for them in their magazines and their conferences, and a magazine called Risk.
Was this in English or
It was in
Spanish?
English, and but there was it was a really good job, and in fact, all my friends, they were like photocopy, they were glorified photocopiers for things, and I was going around meeting, and it was bizarre. I had no. It was the particular magazine that I was involved in was about futures and options and hedges and things. I hadn't a clue what they were.
What is
But
it? That's
sometimes the
crazy.
best car salesperson is the lady, the lady driver who doesn't actually know about the mechanics. So I'd be sitting there with very high level city people discussing futures and options and whatever, and really not actually having a clue because they had a very good training program, and this was the key. I was trained by a top New York sales training consultant, and she basically showed you how to sell anything, right? Even if you didn't really know too much about the product, and the whole conversation and how you're a gondolier in the conversation and how you can, so, and then that was a skill for life that eternally grateful for them for.
Mm.
And but then one day I woke up and I just decided that I had to make a decision whether I was going to buy a flat in London. And in those days, everybody did, and it was like, maybe I should have done because it was,
It's for like 10 grand, wasn't
yeah.
it?
But I just said, no, actually, I think I want to. I went to Spain down and I met the editor of a local newspaper chain, which was then called The Entertainer, which was an English expatriate newspaper in Costa del Sol, Costa Almeria, Costa Blanca. And they were looking for a sales director. And they asked me, will I do it? So I just thought to myself, why not?
Wow. So you literally went from cabin crew to real estate
Well,
to
no, this wasn't real estate. This was
this is
running a newspaper.
pre-real estate
So I
times.
ran this newspaper sales for that. And of course, I got to know all the customers. And everybody then was always saying, well, can you give us some advice on marketing? Where do you think we should be doing? Da, 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 da. And a lot of them were real estate developers, but also financial companies did a lot of work. So I set up an advertising and PR agency, which dealt with so people were using us we organized seminars, we organized tea dance, we did all the PG tips marketing in the Iberian Peninsula, which is including tea dances and whatever. We were used for Marmite. What was the other one? Mustard. I mean, all these English brands that knew there were all these expats living in Spain, and they wanted to tap them, but they didn't know how to, and we did because we were, we were there. We had the knowledge of all the areas that they needed to get, and so we had a lot of financial companies used us. We had an office in Gibraltar, so we had about 4 of the largest financial institutions using us, and it was great. But what happened was that Gibraltar had a disused military marina that Taylor Woodrow bought.
Who's Taylor Woodrow?
Taylor Woodrow, well, they're now called Taylor Wimpey, but Taylor Woodrow is one of the largest developers out of the United Kingdom. Their developments are everywhere, but they used to be Taylor Woodrow, and then there was Wimpey Homes. I don't remember them.
No,
well, they are household names, but I'll forgive you for that. Anyway, they spent a fortune buying this old disused sort of military, sort of half-baked harbour or whatever, and they decided to do a posh development there. And they ran into a few problems with the marketing of it. So I was dragged in. And funnily enough, is using my experience because Alderney has always been a very useful training ground, particularly Alderney Week, So they had this marina that they'd built, and they were trying to get commercial interest for people to take the commercial spaces. So I said, let's do a Queensway Key week. Queensway Key summer program.
So similar, inspired by
and
Alderney
I
Week.
pinched all the ideas from Alderney Week.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, so I put things like
Thank you, Ray Parkin, then.
man-powered flights.
No.
Yeah, and that got about half of Gibraltar went to see that. We did fashion shows. We did Odd Spot. You know, we did quizzes. We did. Well, actually, we did one thing which they don't do here, which was Antiques Roadshow. We brought down some specialists and all the Gibraltarians, and they were all laid out along this, and it filled the commercial spaces.
Wow.
So they were so impressed with that. They said, "Well, look, could you help us with all the residential?" And then we had to negotiate with the government a separate tax category. So we went way beyond the realms of what normal advertising and PR people do. And then with the new tax category, we just set up the high net worth program, which then they said, right, you've got to go around Europe. And we had to literally, I mean, I can't, because Gibraltar's reputation in the early 90s was pretty rubbish. I mean, it was known for smuggling. It had a slightly left-wing government that was, especially a chief minister who was Joe Bassano, who actually was better than the conservative one that came afterwards. I hasten to add, he was much more visionary. And anyway, we started to recruit. So I went around all of Europe doing seminars and literally meeting people one-to-one, based on a little advert that was appear in the local newspapers, which was, have you got a tax problem? And we sold about 200 apartments to high net worth people coming to Gibraltar to have to get a tax cap, you know. And anyway, that went from one to another, and we ended up doing 15 of these things. So and then, as you can see, the real estate started to sort of overtake my life. And but also, when you're running an advertising and PR agency, it's a bit frustrating because you're creating so many hundreds of thousands with these people, and you're just getting your fee, you know. And you actually really
You want the commission.
You're actually really having to do the selling.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
So I was in a show called Surex, which is in Zurich, and there was we had a stand, and we had a very clever system of sales training off stand. It's a much harder job than people realize, you know, to get someone walking past when there's a choice of 300 destinations or whatever they're doing, and you've got to drill them down actually to why they should spend time with you at all. How you get them onto the stand is you know, all sorts of tricks of the trade. Anyway, we were being observed. I didn't realize I was being observed, and there was this multi-billionaire fam who had owned their own private resort in Egypt, were doing something in Andermatt, just in Switzerland. That was very embryonic then, and they approached me.
Wow, you got headhunted.
Yeah, and they said, look, we really like what you're doing, and, you know, would you consider coming and doing similar for us? And I was first of all, I don't know, Egypt. So he said, well, look, you know, they wound it on a bit. He sent his jet, you know, because that always helps. So you're a little bit obliged.
Bet you felt special then, didn't you? Okay,
you know,
I'll get on a jet then.
I've learned not to do that now. It always comes with payback. You know? And anyway, so I went down there, and he said that this was a private town which had a little marina. They owned 40 square kilometers of land that was all desert.
Wow.
And then they had 2 hotels and about 4 things that they had done as their own company, Rascom. And he said, well, you see up there, and he pointed to some barren piece of desert, and which was about, I don't know, 10 square kilometers. and he said, I want you to make that an international golf resort with a managed residential hotel, and
Wow.
basically 200 villas, 300 apartments. And
And you
so
said what? Like, yeah, no problem.
well, he wanted us to bring in international people because they had no problem getting Egyptians to buy, but he wanted a bigger perspective on it. And so I went, okay. So anyway, I said, well, I'll do it as a consultancy. And then they that we did that for about a year, and so I carried on doing all the other things, and then they basically put a gun to my head and said, look, you know, we need you here full time, and would you consider? And they made me an offer I couldn't refuse.
This is a financial gun then.
So yeah, it is Egypt. And we literally, from a step ladder and a brochure promise, sold 300 units to people, to international people, mainly Belgians and Swiss, Scandinavians, a few Brits, Austrians. So I created a sales team, but the problem we had was that the resort itself there was no way anybody wakes up in the morning in Europe and says they're going to buy an apartment in Egypt. It just doesn't happen, you know? So you can imagine the whole scenario. I mean, it's a real challenge. What do you do, you know? And we knew that we had about 2,000 people a week coming to the resort through the tour operators, staying in, I think we had about 7 hotels. So I had to come up with a system of just saying, okay, out of how many of those people can we persuade to buy, something? And so I created a sales program that was basically based on animation. And
Fun.
because there was a Club Med there, and they were looking for chef de village and whatever, and we created a collaboration. So in fact, what people thought were animators, they were salespeople. And so one of the things we had, to give an example, we had a sunset cruise, which was music and da 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 da, but all the crew on board were salespeople. And that boat sold about $25 million.
Wow.
You know,
But those salespeople, they're also quite fun people as well. So I mean, I know a few of the people who used to work for you, and I know that they are charismatic people, who maybe were charismatic before they were salespeople, right? So did you have to then train them? You know, you say, okay, be yourself, enjoy the boat and the guests, but here's what we're really doing. Did you have to
yes,
give them
you've got to be ruthless to be rich. But it's quite interesting because we used to get a lot of people coming into the sales office who would say they wanted a job with us because we were part of the dynamic team. We were one to be part of. The training was very, very thorough. You were literally tested every single morning on your knowledge, because one person in the link, because we were literally fishing people out of the breakfast rooms, persuading the most important person was the person who stood by the loos in Hotel Movenpick, okay, with a little stand and stopping people. And it sounds really easy to do, but it's actually really difficult to actually strike up a conversation with somebody who's just come out of their breakfast, and then to persuade them to go on one of the things. We had a cocktail presentation. We had a lifestyle tour. We had the sunset cruise, and anything just to get their time, to just open up that gap. And I worked out that they were the most important people in the chain. So they got, they were earning like $7,000 or $8,000 a week just by producing leads.
Wow.
And funny enough is, it wasn't the obvious ones that were the best at it. I had a little Mexican girl who was pretty pint size, straight out of Mexico City. I don't know what she was doing in Egypt, because that was what was so weird about Gune. It was really, there were people there from all over the world. You don't know how they got there, but they did. And yet she was the biggest producer. I mean, and she used to fill the cocktail presentations, which was basically a seminar with me going in there, talking to them. And then we'd take the ones that were interested out for dinner, then we invite them for a lifestyle tour, and then we got them to talk about their holidays, what was important to them, what did they know about Elguna, and whatever, and then they ended up buying. So some people went there on their holidays and they walked off with $500,000 worth of house.
Wow.
And they had no intention when they first started. So it's a tough gig.
Yeah, for sure.
But I always used to be able to tell when people came into sales office, say, "Oh, well, can I have a job?" When I say, "What do you do?" I'm marketing and sales and I said, "Okay, right. You see that ring, that bracelet you're wearing, sell it to me." And then you could tell immediately the ones that, that had no clue.
What is it though about? I mean, because it's storytelling, isn't it? I mean, it isn't. I mean, I got this from a lady on the sidewalk in Colombia, in Medellin, and she wanted to feed her children, so I bought about 10 of them.
Really? So you're from Colombia, right?
I spent a bit of time there, just to relax a little bit. But the idea of I mean, it's a bit like that Wolf
How
of
we
Wall
can
Street.
turn that bracelet into an apartment.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, but is there some sort of secret to it, or is it just
asking questions, shutting up? Okay, when somebody comes in, okay, you don't, the bad salesperson will go, "Oh, thank you for coming in. Right, this is what we've got. And now look at this apartment. Look at that. No. You got to find out about them. Okay, so you've got to open up. So where did you get that bracelet from?
From a lady on the sidewalk in Medellin.
So you travel a lot.
I do like you got me now. Now I'm about to go into a story. Yeah.
And also, who, how, what, why, when. Always ask open-ended
Hey, this is like
questions.
journalism. I can see where your sales ability came from, because I mean, yeah, it's amazing. Now I can sort of start to see where.
Why are you here? How are you? How is it for you? For instance, what brought you here? When did you come? These are all questions that they will give you clues as to where they're at, and then you've got to pick through that, and then you've got to work it into what you think might work for them. But it doesn't work for everybody. But we had a list of 17 reasons why someone would give not to come to an event. And you had to know that absolutely perfect. It's like changing gear in a car. Because it was the same excuses. "Oh, I'm only here to go diving. Oh, we never buy abroad. Oh," and you had to know how to answer these questions. These aren't give a reply back. What never? What do you know about Elguna? How,
Well, so you answer a problem with a question.
Yeah. What could I do to change your mind? Why don't you come to...
That's a great question.
Why don't you come to a cocktail presentation and find out?
I love that.
And they did.
Yeah, they did.
And I don't know, I still to this day get people phoning me up from my old team that was there, because basically we ran out of inventory, we sold the whole thing. So they still say it was the best job they've ever had, and they miss it. I mean, the Sunset Cruises were almost, how shall I put it, apocryphal. We had a lot of very strange setups and things, but but a lot of it was going back to linking this to Alderney. Alderney was a very good training zone for particularly Alderney Week and the events that things do, and in general in Alderney Week and in Alderney. It was a good training center.
Very social.
Well, and also communication, also taking an idea and running with it. And for those, you've got to thank the likes of Ray Parkin, because they allowed people to do things and just said, "Right, you want to do an event in Alderney Week? Yes. Right, what are you going to do? I'm going to do the backward wheel flip competition. Right, Okay, so 11 o'clock, off you go.
Do it.
I hope it works. You know, and and your dad also. These were all people who, the concepts of the entertainment, but entertainment with a business raison d'être is much harder than it looks. So when it comes to recruiting people, it's interesting. I am much less the people who were best at that job were people who had done, I wouldn't say vocational degrees, but they were people like, I had one girl who did a degree in waste management and dance.
I love that.
Yeah. And it was from Bedford University, right? I mean, I can't understand the synergy.
No.
But because the dance element meant that she had to go every single week, put on a show. She had to present herself. She had to turn up and do it. Okay. And she also then had to sell her show to the various people and whatever it is and market it. Their interactivity and their personal presentation and their interpersonal skills were way above someone who's not done a degree in economics with doing a BA and blah 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 and an MBA afterwards. A lot of the biggest problem I see in the future is complete lack of interpersonal skills because everybody's going online and everybody is they're reliant on computers to do very basic intrapersonal interactions. And when you're selling somebody a house, or whatever, you've got to have intrapersonal. You've got to be able to read people. You've got to be able to see if the wife is making the decision or whether it's the husband making the decision. You've got to see if the kids are happy. You can't learn that from a computer. And that is something that I really see as a future problem. And in fact, one company we had back in Gibraltar days, which was a tax advice company, they had geeks, and they wanted a program of promotions all the way up the Spanish coasts. But I realized we had a problem, that these people would not know how to handle and how to deal with a group of people at a Mercedes presentation launch. And so I used to have to give training sessions, which was, how would you sell David Beckham a trust fund at a Mercedes presentation launch? So how would you go about actually? And these people said that they'd never been told that. They'd never been showed that. And I think there's something wrong with the education systems or something, which is not training people in intrapersonality. And those who do have that skill, and this is an advice for anybody listening who's got younger, particularly children at student age and things, go and work for an organization like Club Med, or go and work for something which requires public interface, because it will be a skill that you will use for the rest of your life, and it will make you a lot of money.
I want to take a very quick break to thank Bell & Co for helping to sponsor this episode. If you're looking for a place to live on Alderney, whether it's renting or buying, go and visit Bell & Co. They have all the information about what's available on Alderney and can also help guide you to some of the best things to do on the island. Go and visit bellandcoalderney.com and find out how you can escape to paradise. Back to the episode. I love that. And that is such, that's Alderney all over. I can see why you poached a lot of the young talent from Alderney.
Oh, yeah, I'm a thief.
Yeah. We spent our lives growing up on Alderney, entertaining people and speaking to people of all different generations.
Well, you look what I do. Yeah. I mean it's all.
But this is it. Like, telling stories seems to be a skill that you can't teach overnight. You can teach someone the framework or the local knowledge, but actually if they already have that ability to present themselves, then you can build them from there, but I really appreciate what you're saying there, because this is why when I hear a lot of my friends say, oh, their parents didn't want them to do dance at university, or they didn't want them to do performance because they should go get a proper job, and you go, oh my Lord, look at them now, you're like, they can't communicate.
No, they can't. It is frightening. And okay, they might get a job in the civil service or in a heavily bureaucratic or a tax office or something, or great. I mean, but in terms of actually making things happen and being prepared to run a risk with a vision and to being prepared to persuade a group of people to do something, you have to have the intrapersonal skills. If you don't, you can't do everything online. A computer cannot do that work for you.
Yeah. And you're not always going to be part of a giant organization where
No.
that has people doing everything, particularly in the future. I mean,
And a lot of them also, with the onset of AI, okay, a lot of them are going to find they're going to have jobs. So in fact, this is why I always look at, I mean, for instance, the Georgian here. If you look at their recruitment, they always find exactly the same people that I would have employed in my sales office.
oh, Holly's going to be well happy to
No,
hear
they
that.
do, because I mean they have a you can tell who's a good recruiter and who's not a good recruiter, and you can tell by the atmospheres in the establishments. And I'm not going to mention any names, but if you look at the Georgian staff and everything, they are outward going, they're positive, they're good chatters,
They're a lot of
and
fun.
you never feel that they're like running low on the batteries.
They also have a very big social life over here, like
It's
when
very important.
Yeah, big parties.
People have to enjoy being on the island, which is something that I, as a current States member, obviously I get a bit sort of people go, "Ooh, it's not really what a States member should be worrying about," but it's absolutely crucial if we stand any chance of retaining good people, the good public interface, the people who make things happen. We've got to make their lives fun. And this is one thing when I brought a coach over, but actually that was an interchange about him learning English. But
he's a lot of fun. This is the paddle coach.
But he's now, there isn't one person on the island that doesn't know him.
Yeah, he's brilliant. He's so much fun.
And he's been here 3 weeks.
3 weeks, is that it? Oh my Lord. Well, let's talk a bit more about Alderney then, because obviously you came here as a young man, very, very young man. Bonza was a guest house, which is crazy. But then when did you first start coming back and when did you first make this your home?
Well, what happened was I was in Egypt. I was going to live in Egypt. But we were...
Hold on a second. Egypt's had a few big revolutions.
Oh yeah, we actually worked through a revolution with Alex, my nephew.
So did you not get kicked out?
No, we actually it almost became like the sort of the brave ones. I mean, I don't think Alex's parents are very happy, but no, we had there was a revolution. We were there in 2011, and it was very uncertain.
Dangerous.
I never felt it in Alguna. There was only one evening when they had a floating restaurant, which is something I love to do in Alderney, called Pier 88. And it was the sort of place where all the great and good ate. It was a floating pier. And we were all sitting there, and with the billionaire owner, and we were all sitting there eating our lady steaks and whatever. And someone came on the board and said, "Everybody, go back to your house, switch off your lights, lock everything up." And I was like, "Ooh, okay." They're all at the gates of Alguna, which were about 5 kilometers down a long sort of drag, main drag. And okay. And then the owner found, "Let me make a phone call." And he made a phone call and he phoned up security at the gate and said, "What's this about?" And he said, "Oh no, it's a demonstration from all the workers in Alguna. Because they want to protect us, and they want to say what good employers we were." So in fact, it was the other way. But I mean, at the time, it's like, "Oh, better go home."
Wow. So I mean, obviously that's a million miles away.Maybe not a million miles, like a couple of 100,000. I don't know. But you spent the majority of your life in a very warm climate, and then you just started to
well,
make
what happened
roots.
was COVID, dare I say it.
Well,
but there were 2 things. Firstly, he decided to do a resort in Montenegro, Lusticia Bay, and I had to take my team over to kickstart we became a movable feast.
Doing all over again.
So we had to do it all over again, off plan, for this Leicestershire Bay thing, which we got the initial sales going there. So I was, and then he had another project in Switzerland, in Andermatt.
This was never going to end, was it?
And so that also had some initial, obviously, like all these things that are new. He took huge risks. I mean, he bought in Andermatt, it was an old military base. And and everyone said, "You're nuts, what do you think you're doing?" But he had a vision. And he was quite inspirational to
I was
work
going to say,
with.
you must have learned a lot from seeing
He was a
that.
little bit crazy. I mean, you had to keep pulling the white rabbits out of out of impossible hats, and people used to say, you will never sell anything there. Or blah, blah, blah. It was always, you had to deal with a lot of negativity. You had to be able to, again, convey a vision. And that's been one of the things that I feel why, now that I'm back on Alderney, that because there's quite a bit of negativity here from people about new stuff. But I've heard it all before. I've heard all the reasons why you shouldn't do this and whatever, but I also know all the reasons why you should. And that is what that's why I'm doing what I'm doing at the moment.
Well, we'll talk a bit about that, because so you came back here
I came back. I'll tell you why I came back here was because of COVID. I was living in Egypt, and I went in one day to the bank, and the bank manager, who was a friend, called me in and said, "Why are you still here?" And I went, "Well, that's all right, I've got health insurance." He said, "No, he said, don't be so stupid." He said, "There are a million rich Egyptians who will fill those private hospitals up." He said, "You will never get on the list." He said, "You need to get out of here. Okay, you need to go back to a place where you could, if you have to go on ventilation, So I phoned up Samir, and I said, "Look, that's been giving the gypsies warning." And he said, "Look, don't worry, just go back to," he always used to call it, "your island." He said, "Just run it all from there, So I did, and then I just sort of basically decided that actually I quite liked it here.
Yeah,
And actually, my days of, I think one of the other problems I did have was I was doing so much flying. And I realized that my social life at one stage was the business class lounge in Istanbul airport, because we use Turkish Airlines as a hub. You realize, well, actually, maybe that's not quite the best way to fly, best way to live life. So I think it was time for me. I'm a reverse expat. I lived in Spain for 22 years. These are all countries that have hosted me, and hosted me well, but they're not your inner route. Here in Alderney, I can do the things I really like. I'm a musician. I can do classical music. I can do whatever. And also, as I have quite a big background in tennis. I used to organize the British Airways Tour of Champions. And I trained, so I knew, and I lived opposite a tennis club in Spain. So Manolo Santana, I played with him every single week. I was the only one who he would play singles with. I never knew why. Nobody could know. So every single week I had to play.
Well, you are good, though. I've seen you play tennis, and if you don't mind me saying, for a gentleman of your age, I can see how you are running around that. Well, you're not even running around that court. You just know where the ball's about to go, and then you hit it back. And I'm just like, I didn't know he was I didn't know he was wicked at tennis. It's unbelievable.
Well, I'm in training, but so that's when I came here, the tennis club, as everyone knows, was struggling.
It looked a bit old,
and had 8 members that they could find.
8,
yeah. And it had a junior section that was sort of keeping it going, to be honest. And I just they were getting a bit tired of it, and they said, well, they more or less told me that I had to do it, and I remember the day thinking, what have I done? And then I thought, well, okay, let's just apply what I've learned from the other clubs, what I learned from Manolo Santana's club, what I learned from Lou Hode's club, what makes people tick, let's revamp the clubhouse, let's introduce paddle, let's do these things, and look at how we can motivate and whatever. And well, now you can all go down there and have a look. But I mean, it's a different beast.
And how many members do you currently have?
265.
How the hell did you get 265 members on this island?
Just by being nice to people, welcoming them. So I took away all the signs when I went down there initially, were all reasons what you couldn't do. It was no here, don't do this, don't do that, da da da. It was all no, 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 no. Looked a bit like the Aurigny check-in desk, which is all the reasons.
Security.
Yeah, it's all the you can't do this, you can't do that. So I said, right, they're all out. So I took away all the signs. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Anybody, any age, I don't care what you're dressed in, whether you come in wearing a potato sack, as long as you've got the right shoes, go and play.
Wow.
And one of the things with tennis clubs in general, they have an atmosphere a bit like golf clubs of being a bit stuffy and unfriendly to unless you get the young, you're over. And so I had to totally focus on the young, so everything was geared towards what would make a young person who's living here come down and use that club. And I had great support from most people. I mean, one or two didn't like it, but I mean that goes with the territory, doesn't it? I mean,
of course it does, yeah.
And so basically just working getting it, making it friendly, making it usable, making it affordable, and working out how economically it can work. Because I had a view is as long as somebody pays something, all right, then that's better than not having them at all. So I went around all the corporates here and just said, right, would you like a corporate membership? And this is what we'll do, da, da, da. And they like it. And I've got now 8 corporates that have got corporate memberships, plus all the individuals, plus also making it work for what I call the overseas roamers. Just coming up, being creative and adaptive with the membership programs that we have. And then also physically actually just doing clinic after clinic.
These are like
intro clinics.
Coaching.
Yeah, well, intro clinics, basically allowing people, showing them that actually that on a paddle court, you can walk in with absolutely no racket experience at all. And within half an hour, you've had a 5-shot rally.
I love it. And obviously paddle is a massive thing. Where the hell did paddle come from?
Well, paddle was around. In fact, when I lived in Spain, paddle was, they've been there since the start. I played in the 1970s in paddle courts in Spain. And for years, they were in Spain and they were in South America and was popular with Spaniards. They were concrete courses, but there was only one company in Madrid that made the rackets, and it didn't really have the technical backup and lots of what I call foreigners, Europeans, North Europeans used to go down there and go, well, what's that over there? But they were always veered towards tennis. Then somebody had the brainwave of changing the tech and introducing glass paddle courts, expanding the racket ranges and the options, and suddenly it caught on. The problem with tennis is that there's a lot of people out there that, unless you've had a lot of coaching at a young age, tennis is difficult. And the serve in particular, there's either somebody who can't serve or somebody who can't receive your serve. And it just, sometimes you see people just really trying, and it's just, whereupon in paddle, they can walk on, they basically do very quick underarm serve, bang, bang, and the rally's up there. And also tennis clubs began to see a fall in the amount of people playing. And obviously, especially in urban environments, the real estate value of one court, when you can get 3 paddle courts on it, you're doing the maths. It's very simple.
Well, tell me about that, because the tennis club, growing up here, I just a bunch of tennis courts, but now you can't go down near Platt Saline without seeing this bright, shiny blue paddle courts. You've got 2 of them.
Yes.
I mean, we're not talking like 10 years. We're talking, how long did it take you between thinking of getting a paddle court, raising the money, and getting a paddle court?
3 months. Yeah.
That's unheard of on this island.
Mm.
But I mean, and how was that first received?
Well, funny enough is I got a phone call from a second home owner who'd had a house on Alderney since the early 60s. And I'm saying this on purpose because I do feel that second homeowners get a very hard press on Alderney. And actually, this is an example of actually how generous they can be. And in fact, a lot of the facilities here have been donated by second home, and never people have ever thanked them for it. And that's something that Alderney needs to work on. Sorry, that's a little
We'll work on it.
little rant
No,
over.
that's right. So very kind
and they
contribution.
said they'd been down to Cornwall. They'd stayed in a hotel and they saw it was obviously a very similar seascape sort of place like here. And they saw how busy the paddle courts were. And they said, would Alderney like one?
Wow.
And I said, well, yeah, I would, but I haven't got any money, as a club. And they said, well, don't worry about that. And So I then approached the Alderney Sports Foundation and put them in contact and then they also found 3 other donors because we could use the Sports Foundation because it's a UK charity. And by the way, the Alderney Sports Foundation does incredible things for this island, which, again, another unsung hero, Simon Brazier, who has no reason to do it other than his pure love of Alderney. And they could get tax relief in the UK. So basically, we got the first court funded that way. And then one person here, I'm not allowed to say his name, was an obsessed paddle player, very, very keen. And he called me up and said, look, I'd like to help teach some of the juniors. So I said, great. So he came along and we did a summer of, getting juniors on and getting anyone on, really. And he was brilliant. And then he invited me in for a glass of, or rather a bottle of wine, in that November, and just said, I think you need 2 courts. And I went, well, joke. I mean, where are we going? He said, fine, we'll do it.
And like that, you had another court?
Yeah.
Wow. So now we have 2 paddle courts. A lot of places don't even have, they have one.
We have more paddle courts per capita than the Isle of Wight doesn't have any. And they've got about 100,000 residents.
I love that. There you go. So you haven't been here an awful long time permanently, but you've made such
5 years. I've done my porridge.
You know what? I feel that as well because I came back here during the pandemic and I've been here 2 years now.
You've got to do your porridge here. I mean, I don't, when it was obviously, as everyone knows, I write for the Journal. I run my business side of things. I've networked in Guernsey on various things. And then, the sort of difficult question of would I be interested in joining, going
what
for
made
election?
You take that poison chalice?
I didn't make the decision to actually stand until the morning of the closing of the applications.
Wow. Well, I know a lot of people were asking you to. I think
I was under quite a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
Putting it politely. Obviously, it was a very different scenario then. There was a different CEO, chief clerk. There was a different head of policy and finance, which I obviously assumed that I'd be working with, but that didn't quite happen.
But the politics in Alderney is very unique. I think the idea, people in the UK probably have no idea that we have our own states members and that we have a civil service and we have all these things and then we have Guernsey. You've also been elected as our representative in Guernsey. So you are representing Alderney.
So I now have 38 people's names I have to remember, have to lobby.
So how's that going to Guernsey? Is it different?
Well, that's
to
a
here?
bit like, that's a proper full assembly, so, it's like, I suppose it's a mini Houses of Parliament. It's a whatever. It's not something I ever trained for to make speeches, and but I've never felt pressure like I felt on the evening before the runway debate, where I felt I was carrying the future of 2,000 people on my shoulders. And if I mucked it up, would have had disastrous consequences for this
Mm.
island. As it was, we actually won the debate, and we won it 28-10, which was a significant victory because we had to get that bit of the amendment through. And I don't want to talk about boring politics.
No, dude, you're giving me goosebumps here, man. It feels. I'm just very, very grateful. There's always this quote that I love. It's the man in the arena. I don't know if you've ever heard it. It's a wonderful poem, but it talks about the person in the arena, the person that is doing the fight, taking the risks, and the people on the sideline can say whatever they want, but they're not the man in the arena. And whoever puts themselves to represent Alderney on an island like Guernsey, where people may not know about us, I'm just grateful that you're out there and that you're representing. And I know as well that it takes up all of your time. And I know
it doesn't take us. I also am a musician. People don't realize. I mean, I get
you have to find some other outlet to to put in.
And I'm very fond. I mean, I find like every morning I wake up and I get out of bed and I go downstairs and I spend an hour with Johann Sebastian Bach, who's my sort of secret boyfriend.
Wow, take him back.
But and I find that helps me channel, because he's a very complex composer, and it's very mathematical and very very logical, and I find that's a very good way of channeling your thoughts. I often find I make the best presentations or the best sort of I'm in the more of a listening mood, having sort of done that in them. Well, not always, sometimes it depends what you've been doing the night before. But but in general, I find classical music still. I mean, I write even for the Guernsey Press classical reviews, and I was trained. So and that's one thing I did when we were here in isolation. I did the Royal Academy Music diploma for the piano, and where you had to do basically from the 12th century right to 1960 of classical composers, 3 a month, and it was voluntary, but it was a fantastic thing for the brain. And I think one of the things that you have to be careful, and this is a warning to anyone who thinks that life in the sun is going to be, it does frazzle your brain. And it's very easy if you're living in a sunshine climate to really not get that involved with culture. It almost seems like alien. It's more about, and after a while, actually, it's not good for your brain. And that's one of the reasons why I like it back here. People say, do I miss the sunshine? No, I don't. Do I find the winters tough here? They're not great, but they're not awful. But what I find, like, it's at least then you can have time to do other things. You can have time to read a book that you wouldn't have read probably if you were in Spain or in certainly in Egypt. Egypt was a cultural desert, even though it was fine if you were an Egyptologist. But I didn't find that very interesting. I mean, it was, I should have done, really, I suppose.
No. I mean, there's plenty of history for you on this island. And you're a very, very busy guy, but I still find that you always find the time to listen to other people and help other people. You've been incredibly helpful to me, and obviously we shot a film over here 2 years ago now, which is the whole reason why I came back here. And you're incredibly helpful to me. Me trying to raise money for the first time, had no idea what to do, and you've been a great advisor.
I remember that first meeting.
Yeah, just like, I just want to make a movie, But I was also, I'm a very emotional person as well, and I think this is why having someone to help mentor me, and particularly when you're trying to go into states meetings and stuff, and you're trying to present yourself, and you go, and you don't know how to navigate these things. So I'm very, very grateful for you on that side. But how would you sell Alderney to someone? Because this is where we are now. We're trying to figure out how do we look 25 years into the future for the island? How do we bring a new group of people to come and live here? So how with all of your experience in building golf resorts and selling things,
it's a surprisingly simple formula. You've got to get people to take a good hard look at some of their preconceptions and change their mindset.
So what do people think about?
Okay, if you take somebody coming in here, say, who's a go-getter 35-year-old living in London, okay, and I don't know, yeah, good job, blah blah blah. Yeah, you've got to ask, you've got to put seeds in their minds that, okay, so you're going to be doing that for the rest of it. So how much time do you spend in the car taking your children to activities? Okay, you've got 2 children. You're driving around. So either you or your wife on Saturdays, you're nothing but a glorified thing. Here, you can do all those activities, and they're within 2 minutes. I mean, small things like that people haven't thought about. How much of your money is spent on insurance and worrying about crime? Okay, a lot is the answer to that. Okay, so how much, and people say like connectivity, oh God, it's so expensive to get here and blah, blah, blah. Yes, but how much are you spending driving around, going to your social groups or, your network? How much are you actually spending in fuel? And also there's, retail. Here we got cute retail, but we don't want to have what I call a constant retail temptation. If you're in London, everyone's trying to get money off you at any door,
all the time.
and it's constant. So you spend money, like probably 50% of it is unnecessary. Okay, here you don't have that. So yes, you've got to pay Aurigny, but you've got to look at Aurigny as a tax. Aurigny is a tax
It's a paradise
living
tax.
on this island. That's as simple as that.
Yeah.
And I do get a bit frustrated when I see some of the retired people that come here who go, "Oh, but I miss my grandchildren." Well, you should have thought about that before you came here. But that, you need to view that. You need to have in your head that you will spend £10,000 a year with Aurigny bringing your family here, and you must have budgeted that in your head. And when you put it to people,
that's a very
like
good point.
They think differently. So it's all about optics in their minds.
I love that.
And when you think of what we have here, I mean, you have social interaction. I still find that I meet people every day here who I didn't know lived on the island. And one of the questions you get asked, well, don't you find it a bit socially claustrophobic? Well, no, because for the reasons I've just told you. But then I also ask them back, so how many people do you know that live in your town? Okay, they probably know about 4. So you're seeing the same 4 people. People aren't honest about their own lives. You find that they've got a group of 8 couples that they see regularly. That's their life. Well, in Alderney, you've got a much bigger range, much closer. You don't have to put things in the diary like, let's have dinner in 3 months' time. Isn't it? It's like, what are you doing on Wednesday?
Yeah.
And the sense of belonging, the sense of joining a community. For people with small kids here, it's paradise for them. They don't have to worry about, there's nothing much that can go wrong. Whereupon in the UK now, it's a very different. I mean, when I was growing up, my parents didn't think anything allowing us to cycle off to Richmond Park and go around Richmond Park by ourselves and come home. That is not on the menu now. It's not on the agenda.
No
because
way.
no parent would do that now or whatever. And here you've still got that. You've got that freedom. You've got that knowing that people will always know where your kids are. People will always they will keep an eye out for you. I mean, the traditional values that people enjoy. The UK has become very suburban and very cold in terms of, when I had my flat in London, I only knew one person as a neighbour. That was it. There's not the great interaction that people think there is, and it's actually quite I wouldn't say lonely life, but I would say it's hard, very hard work. And upon Alderney, you sort of join into a system. Okay, you could argue that the friends are more immediacy friends, but does it really matter? Are we going to categorize that? So if you're a sort of a soul out there that's looking for a soul mate in terms of a community, this has got a lot to offer. You've just got to get your head over the fact that it is going to be always expensive to get on and off an island 3 miles by 2 miles, of which there's only 2,000 inhabitants, because the laws of volumes will mean that it's expensive. But, you know, if you just view that as a tax, because you pay a lot more in taxes in the UK than what you get. For instance, you know, council tax in the UK is 5 times bigger than here. Well, then there's your FS. You know, it's bang.
And no VAT, which is great.
VAT.
Great for Amazon.
Yeah,
I mean,
well, we can't deny our cost of living food here is high, and we can't deny that. Okay, so let's.
It can be a little bit more expensive.
We can't paint the pantomime too much.
No, but there are good and bad bits, and I found that I'm a lot more useful.
Have I
here.
convinced you?
Well, you've always convinced me, Edward. I always find myself thinking something completely different after talking to you. But I think, you know, I love this island because, you know, I'm one of a million filmmakers in the UK, and, you know, we've never had a podcast on Alderney. So the fact that I get to interview the Alderney legends, and, you know, people
I wouldn't say that.
Well, you are a legend, and you are an Alderney.
More myth than rumor.
You are a myth. But I hope people have listened to this today and they've realised something in that, and they've got a bit closer and a bit more connected. So I'm very, 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 very grateful for your help. Is there anything else that you think that you'd like to say to the people listening or watching this before I let you get off to your meetings?
I would say that, you know, the most important thing is to be positive. That the answer is yes. Now, what's the question? Okay, that's the way I would like more people to do stuff on Alderney and be the mindset. Because I think one of the biggest issues I see here is the lack of comparatives. Because people who spent all their life here, okay, don't really know what the reality is away from here, and they get a big shock when they go away from here. They realize what they have here is so precious. And that is something that we really need to work on, so that people can actually understand, really value the wonderful life work life I don't want to say skills, but life balance,
work-life balance, yeah,
that we have here. Because if you played here, if you wanted to do golf, tennis, paddle, bit of music, I'm just doing the things that I kind of do, you know, and the gym, all right, I don't really go there actually, but you know, assuming that someone does, right, you know, those 5 hobbies in Surrey would set you back about 7,000 to 8,000 quid. In here, you can get it all under £800 for a year, you know. So and it's, you don't have to drive.
It's like minutes away. Like, you can walk everywhere. I mean, obviously everyone does have a car because it's just
too many.
Well, it's just easier. But you know, that's the interesting thing about this island, is that, like, yeah, I think there's a lot of negativity only when people you know, don't realize that the rest of the world is actually, you know, in a challenging space as well. So
well, the other thing which I do think needs to be said, okay, is that, like, you know, I'm doing the tennis and paddle club now, but you've always got to be thinking of the future, and you've always got to be bringing in younger youth. If you don't do that, then things will fizzle out. And there are some older people here that need to learn that lesson. And I've witnessed some pretty awful examples of blocking, where they have not thought about it in terms of the future of that organization. They want it run exactly how they see it, but they never thought of how it's going to progress.
Passing on the baton.
And that's something which I will never be ever accused of. If I'm too old to do it, I stop. You know. Well,
actually, you're one of the younger ones, which is brilliant. So
well, maybe I'm safe to say that.
Well, look, Edward Hill, thank you so much for doing this. I'm sure we'll do another episode in the future, and of course, I wish you all the luck with the States. And
well, I think I'm going to need it anyway. But no, I have to say I enjoy the challenge. It's been a very it uses every ounce of my brain. The topic matters we have to be familiarize ourselves with is, from integrated health plans to renewables to international law to accounts, finances, civil service procedure. It's and then actually being, and lobbying, which so it's a very good training, and I'm enjoying it. It has its moments.
No, I bet it does. Well, thank you for coming on the show today.
Well, thank you.